Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Wordy. We are your hosts. I am Robert.
And I'm Billy.
Today we're talking about Thor: Love and Thunder. It just came out a few days ago and we both watched it and we got some opinions and stuff to talk about. Billy, I must ask you, what are your initial thoughts of this movie after seeing it?
It was very strange.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, without getting too much into it, I don't know, it was strange. It was a little sad,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really interesting because like the whole thing just focused on Thor's kind of existential crisis, and there wasn't really much of like a larger scheme to it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there was, but there wasn't at the same time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, like the literal everything on the line kind of thing. This one seemed a little bit less
Mm-hmm.
consequential. That doesn't mean it wasn't a good movie. It just was. It's hard to follow Spider-Man and Doctor Strange.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. And especially since like the main MCU we kind of know is gravitating towards like a multiversal war type event, that
yeah.
anything that is not related to that kind of lacks in our expectations, I feel.
I think that might be a good way to say it.
Hmm.
Is that how you feel?
So you really want to know how I feel?
I want to know.
I'm going to be very critical of this movie, and I am going to say this is a very big moment for me because I've always been very praiseworthy of lots of Marvel movies, right? There's only a select few that I
Yeah,
don't really like. This
like
one,
Thor too.
yeah, this movie felt very mid. It was like okay, it wasn't good, it wasn't great, it was okay. And
Yeah, I would agree
there
with
are
that.
several reasons why. The big one for me was just like the tone was completely inconsistent with this film. Um, like the first 30 to
So
45
much.
minutes was just inundated with constant jokes that for me felt not funny. They were flat. It was just a barrage of jokes. Like I can take jokes in a movie, especially a Marvel movie, if it's done
Mm.
like sprinkled in every once in a while, if it's like through the natural course of, going through the story. But like it's like every single scene we have involves a joke for some reason. And it's just like I don't need this many jokes. And it became cringeworthy. It became not funny. I didn't laugh for most of this film. There were a few things that I was thought were actually were funny, but for the most part, like
I like the
I,
Old Spice commercial.
it was off. It was one of the things that made me feel off. Like the first almost half of the movie was just so many jokes. So much to laugh about supposedly, but I just didn't feel that way.
Yeah, I feel like because they felt Thor Ragnarok did so well with the humor,
Hmm.
but that was the feeling of the movie was very consistent,
Right.
which was a good word you used earlier. This
Hmm.
one wasn't. Like there's moments where like his life was on the line, but people were laughing because he was like either in a speedo type thing or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it was
Like
very
another thing that also really got to me was that like because of the like constant joking during the beginning part, it felt like the actors were like very dry and very limp in their delivery of their lines. Like it didn't sound like the characters that I've known about. Like Thor didn't sound like Thor. Star-Lord didn't sound like Star-Lord. Some of these characters just felt like, the delivery was just off for some reason. And it may have been just because I just watched it once and like I just don't like I hear it really well the first time, but I definitely feel like there was something off, just something just didn't feel right about it, you know?
I would agree with that. But do you think that was an intentional that Thor didn't seem like Thor because he was lost?
I mean, yeah, but also like the Guardians of the Galaxy should have been the same. I watched them through four movies. I know what they're like. mannerisms, their voices, how they like act in situations. And this one just felt, I don't know, maybe it's because they also was like they were supposed to like interpret the dynamic between Thor and the Guardians as being like tension driven, you know, like they're like two opposing views of how they're going to handle the situation. But still, like I just felt like however they portrayed their lines just didn't seem right to me, you know.
That's true. But I mean, this is also the first time we've seen him after Endgame,
Hmm.
so that could have affected him too.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I agree. Everything felt different.
yeah.
Also,
I,
like Jane,
mm,
like her and her friend, like I don't know, the dynamics seem different than Jane in the first movie. But
yeah.
but I mean that could be for a whole number of reasons that are central to the plot of the movie.
Hmm.
So I don't
Like I
know.
think like the way that Jane is portrayed in this movie compared to the first two movies of Thor, I think is because like she has her own existential crisis. You know, you had mentioned that Thor is having an existential crisis, so isn't she because she's having to deal with the mortality of, you know, dealing with cancer, and you know she's found a way to live a little longer and not maybe not die from the cancer. And she has more of an uplifting spirit because like you know she has this energy and power and charisma and she feels powerful. So I think the way that she portrays herself in this movie is kind of consistent with somebody who just became a superhero and found new life when they were literally like near the doorsteps of literal death.
Hmm, that's fair. You get all these abilities and stuff. Come up with catchphrases.
Yeah.
No, but I know what you mean.
Mhm.
What'd you think of Thor Thor's dynamic with the hammer and with Mjolnir? I'm gonna definitely
Mjolnir.
mess that up. Yep. And what was this? I
Stormbreaker.
yeah, and Stormbreaker.
This has been a while for you, Billy. You don't even
I know,
remember
right?
these weapons names. They're
I know.
crucial.
I just remember the axe and the hammer.
Yeah. Um, I am I I love the cloak of levitation from Doctor Strange because it has a personality and it's its own sentient being, and I think it's very funny how it's portrayed.
Mhm.
But this is the first time we are seeing like these two weapons actually have personalities, which has never been expressed before in any other Marvel film at
No.
all. Like they've always been just objects that have been imbued, using through magic to be wielded and to have magical abilities through that. And in this movie, it made it seem like you know they have personalities, which has never been established. And I'm like, okay, like I
Mhm.
guess. And it's again, it's a thing that's supposed to be made to be a joke throughout the entire movie. That like you know, they're like in this
Yeah.
dynamic where like Mjolnir's the X and now Stormbreaker's the new squeeze. It's like okay, this is why I didn't really care for all the jokes because it's like you're bringing something brand new into canon that was never canon before, and I'm just gonna be like, yep, accepting of that, you know, and especially for the fact that they're using it as a joke, not as a serious thing that like matters. It's just, I thought that was kind of weird that they did that, you know.
Yeah. Didn't they ever show Munir with a personality? I don't think so, right?
No, like literally, like all it does
Well,
is
I mean
just
in this movie.
yeah, because like it did the same thing that like Stormbreaker did, where like it would lead itself towards
Oh,
the
it did lead
imposter.
itself to
Yeah,
Jane.
and then like you know when it went
Yeah.
to Thor, it would like recoil back to Jane because it's like, nah, I got someone else in my life. You know, Stormbreaker obviously had more of the personality, but
Yeah.
Mjolnir had a little personality in itself too. Um, yeah, it felt off. It felt weird. Everything about this movie just felt off to me.
I agree. Everything felt different, but not
Not
like
a good
different
different.
like the Eternals felt different.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what the right word is because off is a good word, different is a good word. Um, I don't know what the perfect word is.
Yeah, and that's how I feel too. Like there's no real good way to describe it, but I just know something totally doesn't make me feel doesn't sit right with me, you know?
Didn't have the right vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I wasn't vibing.
I wasn't vibing to this.
I just snorted. I hope that didn't come in on the on the microphone.
I hope it did.
Uh, yeah, but let's talk about some parts that we did like because we did just
Okay,
talk about
yeah.
a bunch that wasn't necessarily the made us most fond of it. I liked how the hammer broke up and hit
And was
things
able
and
to
then came
like
back
hit.
together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it hit like, in sequence too, like the hammer handle came and then yeah, I like that.
I thought that was really cool.
Um, Things I liked. I The character that I liked the most of this film was Gore the God Butcher. I think Christian Bale stole every single scene that he was in. I think the
Mm.
menace that he portrayed really was portrayed well. I
He did
think,
such a really great job being serious in
yeah,
this like comedical movie,
right, exactly. Being
comical
the
movie.
antithesis of what Thor is basically being, and Gore is like, I want to kill you and I have a reason to kill you and blah blah blah. It's like, and especially since like this movie is filled with color, especially when they're going to the Shadow Realm. There's so much color involved. And then they get to the Shadow Realm, it's black and white, there's no color whatsoever. It's just devoid of all color. And I think that's definitely a theme that we could portray is like, Gore is the antithesis of what Thor represents, which is like, light and embodiment of joy and, hope, and Gore is like destruction and death and despair and feelings of loss and everything else. So I definitely like that they did that in this film, and that's one of the things I do also like is the visual effects, like really honed in on these types of themes.
I agree. They did it very good job with the dichotomy there.
Mhm.
Now, what else did you like about it?
Um, all right, so getting to the end of the movie now.
Okay.
I am a big fan of like all of the cosmic beings from the Marvel universe and the comics. I think now that we're getting into this new phase, new saga of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're going to be introduced to more of these beings. We've had the Celestials before, but that was really, and the Watcher from What If, but that was like the only ones that we actually got to see.
Hmm.
But now the first time we see an actual like really powerful being in Eternity.
Hmm.
I love how Eternity looks in the comics, and the way they did him in the movie was exceptional. I think it was really well done, especially since like Eternity is the cosmic being that is the embodiment of the universe, and they literally portrayed like literally like a Hubble landscape on the body of Eternity.
Hmm.
It looks so gorgeous, and they did him really well. And I can't wait. I want to see it again just to see like the visuals on that alone, because
Hmm.
if you look him up in the comics, he looks pretty much like that. This striking being that has planets and galaxies like in the body, of Eternity.
Hmm. I agree. That was really really cool. I didn't have the significance of the character until you talked about it right now,
Mhm.
but it definitely was the tone there was definitely a lot different too.
Being in that realm too, like I find it interesting that like this being had to be accessed via the Bifrost in order to get to Eternity. Like Eternity is supposed to be like this cosmic being that's omnipresent in the universe, but I guess like he was in this realm, and now that he's not in the realm anymore because now he got access because Gore was the first one that got to him, and now he can just like access the universe, which is kind of weird. I don't know why. Again, I have to see it again to understand that reason why that he's like stuck in this realm that he was never accessed before.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, it was very basic. It felt, it's just like, just this ethereal plane, kind of like the what's it called? The one from Black Panther. The
Uh,
ancestral plane
yeah.
from Black Panther. It felt like that. This other realm that they like crossed into. You're
Mhm.
crossing into the realm of eternity. This very powerful being.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And what do you think about like the resolution there at the end?
Yeah. So I think that eternity did not resurrect the daughter of Gore. I think that eternity became the daughter of Gore. Like there was like it's either him himself or a spawn of him. Because as you saw in the film, like eternity was there, he shrunk down and became the girl, right? Eternity went away and the girls remained. So that must mean that either he, eternity, or a spawn, like a child of eternity, like spawned into Gore's daughter, you know? And also it's kind of
Do
evident
you think it
because
was
like
that, or it's just like the energy part of his energy transformed? Not necessarily it is part of him.
because I
Just that.
think like as you saw in the beginning part of the film, Gore and his daughter are mortal, right? They don't seem to have any kind of special powers or abilities or anything. They almost seem like regular beings, almost like humans. They don't have special abilities or anything like that. Um, but in the end of the film, Gore's daughter has superhuman strength that can be able to wield Stormbreaker.
Mhm.
And that makes me think that, that also with the fact that Eternity shrank down to the child, makes me believe that it's not the actual child, it's something that is evolving in eternity, able to now cross into our universe and be able to embody himself in the daughter rather than he just resurrected the daughter and now she has special powers.
Hmm. That'd definitely be a big plot twist,
Hmm.
like a big surprise. I like that theory.
Yeah.
Well, I like it and I don't like it. I don't like it. No, I think that'd be very interesting. But if that wasn't, then his wish never really came true. Then
Well, it did. Like he doesn't have to know that it's not his actual daughter,
I
because
know, but
this cosmic being probably has omnipotence, omniscience, so it's able to know what she looks like, know her experiences. So obviously
mhm.
Gore can't tell, and he's dead. So he's not gonna be like, well, that's not what I wished for. Like he's not gonna care. I think like you know his last breath, he just got the satisfaction of being with his daughter one last time. You know.
Mhm. What I thought was weird was there was not really like that much emotion at the end.
Mhm.
Like Thor acknowledged, like okay, he'll take her, but like she never
Jane's
really
dead
seemed
now.
upset. Like what?
Like Jane's dead now. Like he's now in the acceptance that like she's moved on.
Mm. Well, I think that part kind of makes sense because like he like was preparing. He could have been preparing himself for it, but like the daughter didn't
Hmm.
seem upset at all.
That like he has to now take care of his daughter.
Yeah, well, like she just saw like she just came back to life. Apparently, let's say it's her. She just came back to life.
Right. He's in this
Saw her
weird
father
place.
for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Has to say goodbye to her dad within 30 seconds, and now is like adopted by some random person who happens to be Thor,
Right.
but like doesn't show any emotion.
Right.
And I can't tell if that makes sense for your theory
Hmm.
if it isn't really her. Because if it isn't, then like the cosmic being might not know how to portray emotions that well.
Right.
So then kind of just goes along with the motions,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I like your theory. It would explain some stuff.
Yeah. He's hiding in like plain sight.
I have to ponder that.
Hmm. I'll have to see it a second
Ponderable.
time to see if like maybe I have credence to it.
Let me know.
Yeah.
Still like that theory.
What did you think of like the god realm, like the god city where all the gods were, Zeus and all these other gods? What did you think of that whole scene?
I thought it had so much potential.
It was like lackluster.
I think there they used too much humor.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Um, like it had so much potential. Like all these like godly beings, Zeus,
Hmm.
Hercules could have been like we'll talk about that later. But
Hmm.
like there's so much potential with all these like gods and stuff to just be really cool. You know what I mean? See Thor
Yeah,
actually interact with like non-Norse gods.
be the actual gods that we kind of knew of in mythology.
Yeah, like they didn't have to be exactly alike. They could have been a little bit
No,
different. But not necessarily as much of a joke.
yeah.
If that makes sense.
Hmm. Did you think that Zeus actually was killed by Thunderbolt? Like, did you think Thor actually did kill him?
I did think so.
Me too.
And I
I
was
was like,
like,
well, the dynamics just completely changed in this universe.
I know, right? Because I was like, that is like such a huge thing, and they kind of just wrote it off as if it
Hmm.
was nothing. But now it makes sense why they didn't really emphasize on it.
Yeah.
What'd you think about it?
So I agree that it's like way too jokey, especially like with Zeus. Like, I think Zeus should have a little more prominence. I mean, obviously, I think like he had a lot of hubris because he's like the king of the gods, essentially. The lesser
Mhm.
gods, at least, not like the celestial beings that are actual gods, like eternity. Um,
Yeah,
but like just the way he's portrayed afterwards, like yeah, you can be hubris and like have Thunderbolt make sparks and fireworks and everything else, that's fine. But then like, having the joke that like, he comes down to see Thor and he like picks up his skirt and like does his little thing, like it doesn't make it seem like, there's a consistency with his character either, especially at the end when we have the mid-credit scene and we have him act and say things that are very, very serious. It's like, wait, is this the same character that I just saw in this series, this whole scene where he was just like, kind of like Mr. Jokester again, a little jokester kind of thing, like yeah, woo.
yeah.
Like I'm not
I don't
saying that
know.
Zeus should be like, the stereotypical way that it's portrayed in Greek mythology, that like he's like this like being of like power and everything else. Like yeah, in Greek mythology, like Zeus is a kind of a goofball at some points in certain stories and stuff. But he's still like this
Mhm.
revered god. But this one it was
Yeah,
made, which would be like jokey, and the rest of the gods they're just like really don't make sense either. There are lots of gods that are like from like the human world too. That was like I think one of them was like what was it, like a teacup or some shit. Like it was very weird to have like all these different like gods.
yeah. I feel like they didn't have a presence.
Yeah,
Like he didn't. You know, like how
they were
some people just
there
have like
just
a
to be
presence.
there, and they weren't there for like substance.
Yeah. Like how like whenever Tony Stark gave like a speech, he had a presence to him,
Hmm.
even though he could be joking around. Just
Yeah.
like you were captivated.
Hmm.
I think that they didn't really have that quality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about the post credit scene though? Like
Okay.
with the little
So I did not know what to expect from the post-credit scenes. I had a theory as to what the post-credit scenes were going to involve. The first one made sense. The one where we found Hercules, we were introduced to Hercules, and he's instructed to take down Thor. Makes perfect sense. Hercules is a big part of the Thor mythos in the comics. He is
oh,
a villain at the beginning, but then he turns into his friend. So probably that's what's going to happen here. Whenever Thor is going to return, whenever we see Hercules battling out against Thor, he's going to be a villain, and then be like, "Oh yeah, I've actually changed my ways," and then he's going to become a friend. So that's a fine post-credit scene. It's the last post-credit scene that really got me, and I was like, And I forgot to send you like a Variety article that I saw that like Marvel's new strategy with post credit scenes is not like introducing new characters that are based in the future. It's more just like rehashing stories that are told within the movie rather than showing what's going on for the future, you know? Like the best post credit scenes that I saw were from uh Eternals, where you had not one but two scenes where you established characters that will be set up for future Marvel projects. But that hasn't been really been the case for the last couple of movies. You know, Doctor Strange only had one with Clea. This one only had one with Hercules. And the last scene that we
Mhm.
saw from Thor was basically Jane going to Valhalla and meeting up with Heimdall, which is like, yeah, we already knew she's going to Valhalla. That's the point. Like, we didn't have to see the scene happen. Like, and there's some people that are like, oh, well, since we see this scene happen, like, that means that she could potentially come back. And I'm like, I haven't gone too much into seeing if she can come back from Valhalla. I don't know what the mythos is about that, but I just felt in the moment when I saw it, I'm like, it was a very pointless scene. Like, we already know she died and went to Valhalla. We saw that. So there should have been no reason unless it was to set up something. I honestly thought that the last post-credit scene was going to set up something from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Set up the High Evolutionary, set up Adam Warlock, set up something from that movie because they were in the movie. They dipped in the first act, kind of maybe tease at the end to say, oh, this is what's going to happen with the Guardians. You know, remember them from the beginning? But they didn't do that. And maybe it's just the way that they're going to market the movie. Maybe it's just the way that they're going to set up how they're going to portray, you know, the sequel. I don't know. But I feel like it was wasted, you know? I feel like they're starting to waste the second post credit scene because they know we're going to wait in the theater for that scene, and it's gonna just be a letdown, you know?
Mhm. I don't know. I felt like the post credits, like I agree, it could have been a little bit more substantial, but
Hmm.
I feel like it felt it fit the vibe of the movie.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like one last joke
Inconsistent,
at the
right?
end.
This
Not a
movie is
joke.
inconsistent, and we have an inconsistent post credit scene.
Exactly. Which therefore is consistent with the inconsistency.
Hmm. What did you
Right.
think about like the post credit scenes? Did you feel satisfied at all about, you know, seeing Hercules, you know, seeing Jane go to Valhalla?
I was surprised by Hercules
Hmm.
because I didn't know about like the whole Thor dynamic in the
Yeah.
comic books.
Hmm.
Um, I was, to be honest, I was kind of happy to see her actually get there.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
And it did feel like they were trying to build to something like she might come back or something.
Right.
But I don't know. No, no, so, which is Italian for I don't know. So I'm sorry that brought in another language.
I just feel like, you know, and also like I've noticed that like Thor will return. Where? Doctor Strange will return. Where? Like you haven't really given
Mhm.
me like a thing to look forward to. I just know that they will come back at a certain point, you know. And I think because like, you know, in a few weeks we're gonna have San Diego Comic Con and we're going to have the presentation from Marvel Studios about what their future is going to be for the next probably few years. Then maybe we'll have some
Mhm.
clarity. But I think like a lot of people right now are like, we don't know what's going on with Marvel and what their plan is. Like we know that Secret Wars and the multiversal war is going to happen because we've been led to that. But everything else is kind of like, you know, up in the air at some point. And it's like, I understand that. And someone
Mhm.
actually asked me, my friend asked me, do I feel like there's Marvel fatigue? Like, do I feel like with all these shows and movies, do I feel like there's some like fatigue about like watching all these movies and shows and they're starting to like intentionally be lackluster in certain points and you know we have expectations about what we're going to see in the movies and I don't have fatigue but I'm starting to feel like there's a lot of underwhelmingness. There's a lot of things that are being like pushed down, held back intentionally
Mhm.
for us to now watch the next movie and then watch the next show and watch, you know, so on and so forth. so that way they can
Hmm.
build up to whatever is coming, you know. Um,
Hmm.
and that's how I just feel in general. Like after No Way Home, like that became the pinnacle, and then we kind of like slumped a little bit, and we're in this slump now where it's kind of like, you know, I have expectations, but
Yeah.
obviously I know they're not going to be absolutely met. But like it's starting to go to a downward trend where my expectations are starting to lower themselves as well as the movie quality, you know?
Yeah. I was thinking when, like, right before you said that, that it feels like Marvel is, before, like, up into Endgame, the universe was like, their universe was relatively small. I mean, they had, like, the Earth heroes, they had the Guardians of the Galaxy. That's
Mhm.
pretty much everything. Like, they had the main Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy, and that was pretty much it. I mean, they had, like, some other characters, like, they had just introduced Captain Marvel, they had Black Panther, they had Ant-Man, they had Spider-Man at that point,
Mhm.
but everything just seemed to gel together really well.
Right.
Right now, I feel like they're building so much that
Mhm.
it's hard to keep everything
Connected.
not consistent, but like together. Like
Mhm.
the stakes of each thing is completely different. Like, you know what I mean? Like, uh, not Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, the TV show, which hasn't ended yet. Like, there's not much stakes in that show.
Right.
There wasn't much stakes in Moon Knight.
Mhm. Moon Knight
At
was
least
also
through the whole.
different because like Moon Knight was completely separate from the MCU. Like we didn't have any references to anything that happened in the MCU. It was like it almost felt like it was its own
Exactly.
independent show, you know?
Exactly. And Hawkeye, not really much stakes there.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, there's stakes for the characters, but like on like a cosmic or universal uh scale, there's not much.
Yeah. It
And
wasn't leading to something down the road that was going to be significant.
exactly. And I think the hard part, like they could get away with that. Like Captain America 2, one of my favorite movies. They could
Hmm.
get away with that. I mean, there's a lot of stakes for like the human race. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not a good example. What's a good example? The first Captain America. No, that's not a good example. What's a good example? I don't know. But like,
I
I
think
feel like
every
this.
single movie in the first saga in the Infinity Saga had some sort of significance at the end, you know. Well, you could say like, you know,
Exactly.
certain movies had a point to pointing to some other movie that actually was like, okay, this movie's connected to this movie, and this is what caused from that. Like Winter Soldier, for example, that caused the Winter Soldier
Mhm.
saga to get into Civil War because of Age of Ultron, and
Exactly.
then that led to the Sokovia Accords, which leads to the disbanding, which leads to the easement of going into Infinity War. So I think
Mhm.
everything kind of like interplays in that way, you know, where
I
it's like,
agree.
oh, this could be connected here, and this can be connected here because the logically goes here, here, here. You know, the only things that have really
I
been
agree.
consistent has been like Loki, No Way Home, Doctor Strange. Those are the only three that make sense because they're all involving the multiverse, which is the main thing they're all going to.
Mhm.
Everything else is kind of
But
like
I
a
think
sideshow.
even they're not consistent. I feel like they're not necessarily consistent with each other though.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're consistent in that, but they're not consistent in playing off of each other. Like
Right.
they're all multiverse stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't. There's no threads that connect them other than they have to deal with the same thing. Like
Yeah.
nothing in No Way Home seemed like if they didn't release Loki yet, or
Mm-hmm.
they decided not to do the TV show Loki, it doesn't seem like No Way Home would have been any different.
Yeah.
And the same thing if they decided not to do No Way Home,
Mm-hmm.
Doctor Strange didn't seem like it would have been any different.
Yeah.
And I also think because Endgame and Doctor Strange and No Way Home had such like an important effect that
Mm-hmm.
if a movie isn't gonna save the universe, then it doesn't seem to matter in a way. You know what I mean? So I feel like fatigue was a good way to describe it because it's like when you work out and you just keep working out. Like I'm gonna do my hardest workout today, and tomorrow I'm gonna do my hardest workout today, beat the one I did yesterday. And at some point, you get to like that peak, and you can't get any better, so you need to cut back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you're cutting back, it's like not like the workout isn't as good because you have to cut back.
There you
You
have
know what I
some
mean?
perspective.
Exactly. Or something comes up and you can't work out for as hard or something
Mhm.
like that. And you feel like that workout was useless because it wasn't as hard as the day before. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I mean, we could be completely wrong because we're just starting out phase 4. So we could be
Yeah,
completely wrong, and there could be like, something like, that connects every single thing. But I think
it
like
could be.
there's so much like content that's being created that it feels like everything is independent of each other and there's no like one linear thing that connects. And Secret Wars may be the thing
Exactly.
that connects every single storyline back together. Same thing with like Infinity War, where it connected everything back together. But right
Maybe.
now,
I
it's
think
kind of
there's
like,
still connections though before that.
yeah.
I don't know.
So, what would you give as a final grade for this movie, Billy? On a scale 1 to 10.
I'm not sure if on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe like a 7.
A
But
7.
if I ranked it for Thor movies, it's better than 2. Um I like the first one a little bit better. So it's below the first one, but better than the second one.
Okay. I would give it a 6.5. That's what I felt. And what's funny is that like I'm consistent with like the ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. Like when I said I think this is a
Are you?
6.5 and I looked it up, it's 68% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of consistent here. Doctor Strange is the same thing. I said it was like an 8 out of 10. It's 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm pretty good with like,
So you're a good judge of the majority.
yeah. Um and if I were
And
to
what you're
rank this,
saying is people don't need to go to Rotten Tomatoes. They can just listen to our review
yeah,
or your review
exactly.
specifically.
And if I were to rank this, I'm not gonna do it in terms of Thor movies because it's not like my niche movie that I would say. But I would say in the
Mhm.
scheme of Phase 4, this was the second worst
What was the
Phase
worst?
4 movie, right above Black Widow.
Okay.
Everything else was better for me in my opinion. This one was just not as good.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to though Miss Marvel, the end, and their next movie.
hmm Which will
I forget what
be
it was.
Black Panther. That's in November.
Was it Black
But
Panther? Okay, that's right.
then we're gonna have Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, I think the Werewolf by Night Halloween special, and then Black Panther.
Nice.
Yeah, good
Very good.
stuff.
Good job.
Yeah. Well,
But
our show for today, everybody. If you liked it, please like it down below. If you like that, then go to the subscribe button because why not? And if you have a comment about Thor or any other thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, go down below and type your way down there. And until next time, stay nerdy.
stay nerdy, everyone.